Is Antarctica the cradle of mankind? Controversial alternative researchers such as Graham Hancock believe that the frosty continent hides a secret that overturns the entire historical record. But is it possible that the South Pole was once home to a lost civilization? And above all, if Antarctica was only discovered in 1820, why does it appear on maps that are thousands of years older? Adolf Hitler's secret lair, hidden alien bases, and the entrance to the hollow interior of the Earth. In certain circles, Antarctica has long been suspected of being so much more than a colossal ice desert. While conventional scientists merely roll their eyes in annoyance at such rumors, the alternative opposite side points to all the strange incidents and observations that have already been recorded in the eternal ice. Some would like to recognize artificially created pyramids in the Antarctic mountains, and others are puzzled by crashed UFOs and gates carved into the rock. And if there is anyone who is open to more alternative currents, it is Graham Hancock. Okay, admittedly, by his own admission, even the Brit can't do much with extraterrestrial Antarctic inhabitants and Nazi UFOs. And yet the controversial researcher and writer is firmly convinced that what is written in our history books has nothing to do with the historical truth. To summarize briefly and concisely, Graham Hancock is certain that long before our time, an advanced civilization existed that produced incredible technologies thousands of years ago. However, even the most futuristic inventions could not prevent the mysterious people from being wiped out by a global flood catastrophe at the end of the last ice age. However, a few managed to escape the apocalyptic destruction, and then went out into the world to bring the gift of civilization to the simpler peoples. To support his thesis, which is firmly rejected by the established research community, Hancock points to some astonishing parallels between the traditions of ancient cultures. For although the different peoples have never officially crossed paths, they essentially know one and the same story: the story of a devastating flood that plunged the world into chaos and brought forth higher beings and gods. According to Hancock, however, these were not deities in the classical religious sense, but the survivors of the precursor civilization, who were generations ahead of their more primitive contemporaries. The similarities in the stories are no more a coincidence than the fact that cultures in different corners of the world began to build enormous pyramids independently of each other. But that is by no means all. Antarctica is also said to prove that things took place in the distant past that we generally consider impossible. We remember. As mentioned at the beginning, Antarctica was only added to the world map in 1820. Officially, it was Edward Bransfield who was the first to see the Antarctic Peninsula. However, Hancock is now convinced that this is simply not true. Documents such as the Piri Reis map, the Walsemüller world map, or the maps drawn by Aurentius Phineas are said to show us the South Pole several centuries before its official first discovery. However, this raises a fundamental question. Even if the maps really do show Antarctica, they still date from the 16th century. And how do the documents relate to a lost civilization that perished at the end of the last ice age around 11,700 years ago? Well, quite simply, according to Hancock, the depictions from the early modern period refer to significantly older maps. They are based on sources dating back to 13,000 BC. And regardless of which people may have created the template for the later maps, it must have been an advanced, perfectly networked group that could reach practically every corner of the Earth. But there are also those who suspect an even more direct connection between the mysterious civilization and Antarctica. Could it not be that this culture first blossomed at the South Pole? In view of the fact that Antarctica is the most hostile and coldest continent on Earth today, the following news comes as a surprise to many. 90 million years ago, there was still a lush, flourishing rainforest here. This is shown by traces of plants, roots, and pollen recovered from an ancient drill core from West Antarctica. Graham Hancock also heard about this sensational discovery, and when the Brit was once a guest on the Flagrant podcast, he was asked whether it was possible that our ancestors once lived in the sprouting Antarctic forest, to which Hancock replied the following, quote, "There was undoubtedly a time when Antarctica was lush and green, but the question is, was it at the time of the human species? This is where it gets tricky. The lineage of Homo sapiens goes back about 6 million years, if we accept the conventional theory of evolution. But 6 million years ago, Antarctica is said to have been as cold and icy as it is today. When I wrote my first book, Fingerprints of the Gods, in 1995, I was very interested in Antarctica. An interest that did not come out of the blue. At the time, Hancock was largely inspired by the work of U.S. historian Charles Hapgood. Just like Hancock, Hapgood was also convinced of the theory of the precursor civilization, and he actually located its home in northern Antarctica. The catastrophe that led to the destruction of this civilization, in turn, had a powerful trigger: the shifting of the Earth's crust. In his book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, Hapgood presented a series of ancient maps that did not coincide with the official state of knowledge at the time. In The Path to the Pole, he in turn put forward a theory that has been at the center of heated debate ever since: the theory of the Earth's crustal drift. But how is this even possible? How can it be that the entire Earth's crust simply shifts like that? In the aforementioned podcast, Hancock illustrated this incredible idea with the following example. The phenomenon says that from time to time the entire outer crust of the Earth shifts like the peel of an orange, a very loose orange peel. The fruit inside remains intact and in place, just like the Earth's core. If this has happened, Antarctica was once in a warmer region before it shifted to a colder area. According to Hapgood, the shifting of the world set in motion a chain of devastating catastrophes that ultimately led to the demise of the forgotten civilization. But how often does such a brute natural spectacle actually take place? Should we prepare ourselves to soon become victims of the next shift in the Earth's crust? Fortunately, Hancock gives the all clear in this respect. The question is whether it will happen at all. Of all the theories I have supported, this is the one I have been most criticized for. I'm now much more concerned with the Younger Dryas period impact hypothesis. A small note: the Younger Dryas period describes a cold relapse lasting about 1,000 years after the first warming of the Earth at the end of the last ice age. Alternative circles explain this mysterious development with the explosion of a meteorite in the atmosphere, which triggered widespread forest fires as well as destabilization of the ice sheet. Hancock explains his change of heart from the Earth crust displacement theory to the impact theory as follows. When I wrote Fingerprints of the Gods, I was looking for causes that could have triggered a global cataclysm 12 to 13,000 years ago. This is exactly the period to which the astronomical factors point. Hapgood's theory seemed very valuable and useful to me, but as time went on, I turned more and more to the impact hypothesis. On the trail of the catastrophe's trigger. But why is it precisely this epoch that is suspected of having marked a deep break in the history of the development of civilization? Hancock has the following to say. At that time, the global climate had been warming for a few thousand years, but the Ice Age was still present. There were large ice caps in North America and Northern Europe. Finally, 12,800 years ago, two things happened at the same time. A dramatic cold snap accompanied by temperatures equivalent to those during the height of the Ice Age. But in the same breath, the world's oceans experienced a mysterious influx of fresh water. I say mysteriously because you wouldn't expect meltwater to flow into the ocean when the Earth is freezing. A puzzling phenomenon, but one that the impact hypothesis can explain. The immense heat released as a result of the impacts in North America and Europe was enough to carry huge amounts of meltwater into the sea. As a result, the Gulf Stream was cut off, and with it, the global conveyor belt that significantly influences the climate in Northern Europe. For Hancock, there is no question that the consequences of this development meant a drastic upheaval for life on Earth. Quote, in the 1,000 years that followed, the entire megafauna of the Ice Age died out. Whether saber-toothed tigers, woolly mammoths, or giant sloths, they all disappeared within this time window. And of course, they did not die out for no reason. It was the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas period that wiped them out. So we have the epoch in which the megafauna disappears. But then, 11,600 years ago, the Earth warmed just as rapidly and dramatically as it had previously cooled. We are dealing here with a temperature rise of 10 degrees within a few centuries. There was a further collapse of the ice sheet, and again gigantic quantities of meltwater flowed into the oceans. This could theoretically have been caused by a sudden burst of solar activity, but I personally don't believe that. According to Hancock, it is essential that we recognize the connection between the global catastrophe and our own past. According to him, it is almost frightening how much the timing of the cataclysm coincides with the cultural traces of our ancestors. While the warming caused by the meteorite impacts began around 11,600 years ago, the roots of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey date back to the 10th millennium BC. And according to Plato, Atlantis was erased from the face of the earth around 9600 BC. But what does a fictional myth have to do with the historical truth? Well, whether real or fictional, according to Hancock, Plato's story gets right to the heart of his beliefs. In ancient times, there was a civilization that was superior to all others, and which perished as a result of a devastating catastrophe. But what shouldn't go down at the end of our video is your click on our subscribe button. Join our community now and look forward to many more exciting posts.